Hi, we're going to continue our conversation about using quads and EdgeFlow. The reason why I have the slide up is because when we start getting into the conversation of EdgeFlow, we're really talking about a version of what I call an alphabet. Within language, there are patterns that show up in language over and over again to create flow and structure so that people can understand each other. And we understand how the word the and or and all these common conjunctions and prepositions that get used in language all the time, they're essentially the glue between our nouns and our verbs and our adjectives. These kinds of repeating patterns are become important to the structure of a language. Well, I would argue that that same repeating pattern exists within modeling. And if we are in tune with the way Maya likes its quads, or any 3D package for that matter, we could basically say that our primitives are talking to us. They tell us kind of already what are the kinds of formations that Maya tends to like when it comes to the creation of CG form. Basically, Maya is giving us clues on how we can model and we can apply them to the new shapes. If I were to open up a more complicated model, let me go ahead and open up this drill. In MCR, we're going to be looking for you to start moving into the next level. Now, when you look at this model, there's a lot of complexity in these forms, and it would rival, parts of a car model if you were to do that. So there's a world of modeling, and there's a world of modeling language within this drill form that you have here. Now, if I were to turn on the wireframe, you can see it starts getting complicated right away in terms of some of the EdgeFlow patterns that you see happening. But there are things that happen all the time in modeling when it comes to handling certain parts of the model. Like, what do you do when there's curvature? How do your edges need to be oriented? When I want to make a hardened, sharper edge, what am I doing with my edges there? All right. When I need to make a complex transition from an area of high detail into an area of low detail. When there's a change in direction where the forms are going from this part going down to this part, how do you manage the edge flow in such a way that you get the forms that you want? So right now I'm looking at it in one mode, but I hit the 3 key. It works pretty well. But sometimes in the beginning, working and thinking about form, this level of complexity is a little bit challenging for your average beginner. So one of the best ways to learn about creating complexity is by starting to look at parts of the model as if it were flat. In other words, if I were to just worry about this shape from this angle and solve the edge flow problems from this angle, and then I would look at this part of the model and say, what's going on here and how do I need to handle my edges from this part of the model? And then I'm going to look at the top part of the model. So how am I going to put the edge flow patterns necessary to create these forms from this side? And then let's look at the back of the model. And essentially, you're helping create key edge flow patterns. You could do them almost flat to begin with, and then start shaping and bridging these different quad patterns together to make one more complicated shape. To learn this takes a little bit of time. But within this model, there's a lot of recurring patterns that we can use, and it comes from this language that I was telling you about. And this language can be learned just like any other language. And sometimes it's best to learn with simple flat shapes. And I want to just start with the letter C because Maya has already got a primitive that already kind of gives us a clue on how Maya would like us to model that C. Let me bring up the pipe tool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of size to that. Let me get the, not the height, let me get the thickness of that so that's a little bit thicker. I want to try to hit the thickness of that C. All right, and then maybe I'll just make it a little bit smaller overall. Now I like thinking about edge flow in terms of flat terms. And what I'm doing here is I went to another window because I want to get rid of the faces in the bottom. Sometimes when you're learning, it's just really best to just kind of keep your work a little bit simple. And when I'm working, I do try to kind of find a way to simplify my modeling life earlier. Now, when we look at this letter C, and then we look at the pipe tool, this flattened version of a pipe tool. And again, it's no thickness right now, so it's an easy way to think about it. There already is sort of a hint at what the answer is and how to model this. And if we would actually go ahead and eliminate these faces, we essentially have the beginnings of the letter C. All right. Now, if you notice, Maya is already telling us what it likes in the formation of curvature, of round shapes. Notice, just like in our quads and EdgeFlow lecture, look at these wedge-shaped quads. Basically, they're creating curvature. So while this sort of works as the letter C, this shape is not the exact shape of this. But I can learn from this C, and that's really important, that we can learn from what Maya is already doing so that we can actually build the exact C that we want. And so what I do sometimes is I'll use different tools that Maya has in 2016 to kind of build these EdgeFlow patterns. So one of the ways that I will use is the Create Polygon tool. And what you can do with the Create Polygon tool is literally start off by holding down the C key and then just snapping to the curves, all right? And what I'm doing is I'm roughly plotting out evenly spaced points so that I can get the shape of the C. And I'm going to work my way around. I'm going to try to do my best to try to match the points opposite me. Now, I might have to make some adjustments later on. But the point of the matter is that here, I'm just going ahead and trying to do the best I can to get some even spacing. So now we've got our flattened version of this shape. Now, if we weren't working in 3 key, believe it or not, you might be able to get away with this as a model. Believe it or not, in some of the models that Maya makes, like for example, it's character sets. All right, if I were to go to create text, and I would kind of type in the word, let me type in the word C, and then go with a bevel, hit apply. If you look at it, that's just one big massive n-gon right over here. And technically, if we weren't using 3 key smoothing, you could probably live with it. Okay? Maya makes it. There's a precedence. Now here's a problem though. I hit the 3 key and all sorts of nastiness ensues. So depending on the workflow that I'm using, 3 key does not really jive well with n-gons, which is one of the reasons why we try to stay away from them in our modeling. All right. Now this kind of way of making characters Maya has been around for a long time, and the way they kind of trim out the shape. But if you're only going to be in one level modeling, if you're only going to be in one mode, you'll probably get away with it. But we're working in 3 key. We're trying to use the discipline of smoothing. And we run into the same issue here. If we hit the 3 key, we're going to get some nastiness. So this is why you have to part 2 this shape with the multi-cut tool. Okay, Maya likes the quad shapes. So if we go to the multi-cut tool, we're going to over here. Let's go ahead and just start connecting the dots. So more or less, I've got my letter C. So I use the Create Polygon tool, all right? And if I want to, I can adjust the spacing of some of my shapes. So if I hold down the C key, sometimes I got to move them out of the way and then hold down the C and then replace them again. So again, I just work a little bit on spacing because I want to go for even spaced quads. So there you go. There goes our letter C using quads, following that shape. This is actual technique called polygon snapping a curve. And it's a valid way of working where if you were to draw your curves and then go ahead and snap your polygons to the curves, you can use the curves to kind of be sort of a template for guiding your EdgeFlow. So that's a flattened version. But let's say we wanted to kind of make it dimensional now. Again, we're trying to find a pathway that's easy to kind of work with as a beginner or as someone who's learning EdgeFlow, so that we can kind of take apart. So we'll start with a flattened version. And then we can go extrude for depth and thickness. All right, go straight down. And there you go. Now, we would need to do one other step if we were working in 3-key, and we need to keep that shape. Let's say we want a little bit of sharpness of those edges. Well, now we would go ahead and add our holding edges. And you can use the Insert Edge Loop tool to kind of go ahead and do that. And so basically the idea of the Insert Edge Loop tool is that we're preventing the smoothing process from overtaking the entire model. It actually quarantines the smoothing process. All right, so if I go over here, and I'm basically using 2 edges alongside the main edge for that. All right, so once I do that, I hit the 3-key, and now I've got a shape that holds up. And if I were to turn off the wireframe, it works out really nicely.